evil. Therefore, the people who are unequal at the top are evil, and the people at the bottom are virtuous. You weren't a better person when you're poor. Okay, no one is a better person just because they're poor. And by the way, no one's a better person because they're rich. Arguing with people on the left is sort of like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. You have to be ready to punch back twice as hard. Facts don't care about your feelings. If you don't want to be permanently poor in the United States, you need to do 3 things and 3 things only. Graduate high school, get a job and hold it, don't have a baby before you're married. That's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, conservative superstar, Ben Shapiro.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for waiting until after Sabbath for me. That's why it's so late. I really appreciate it. What you didn't know is that by doing that, by waiting till like 9:30 at night, you're all Jewish now, so congratulations. Everyone hates you and win for the Hebrews. So tonight, I want to talk a little bit about the divisions splitting conservatives from one another. We are 4 months from a presidential election pitting the most corrupt, manipulative, self-obsessed Democrat in America against Hillary Clinton. I'm joking, but not really. This election pits 2 of the most unpopular people in the country against each other. Hillary Clinton, who is a lifelong corrupt criminal, a pathetically self-serving, ambitious, vile rapist defender, a congenital liar, a felon, who despises founding principles and traditional notions of decency, against Donald Trump, who's an arrogant, irreligious, anti-constitutional, ignorant, big government ad hoc panderer who gave Hillary money. Now, I'm not here to be popular. Now, there are some conservatives who say that we should vote for Trump to stop Hillary. By the way, I have total sympathy for this position. I really do. I have lots of sympathy for this position. I absolutely respect and understand the position of those conservatives who say they have to stop Hillary, although personally I think it's going to take Dorothy with a bucket of water to do that. Hillary will certainly stack the Supreme Court with hardcore leftists who are going to gut First Amendment protections for speech and religion, and Second Amendment protections of gun rights, and Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure, and Fifth Amendment protections of due process rights, and 10th Amendment states' rights. She's going to continue President Obama's foreign policy of setting the world on fire, putting the fire out with battery acid, and then setting the world on fire again. She's going to tear down our churches. She'll use the educational system to destroy basic concepts like the traditional family. She'll raise taxes. She'll craft new and ugly regulations. She'll open the borders, and she'll try to make sure that everyone who comes in illegally becomes a citizen. Overall, she will be the second worst president of all time after the current jackass who runs the place. So, now that said, there are other conservatives, including me, by the way, who have said that conservatism is in danger of slaughtering its principles on the altar of Trump. Trump is personally gross. He's a man who brags about having sex with other men's wives and never wanting to repent. He's got totalitarian instincts. He says protesters ought to be punched or carried out on stretchers. He wants to personally target people like Jeff Bezos because he owns the Washington Post and also owns Amazon.com. He plays footsie with bigotry. He goes easy on denouncing the KKK on national TV. He doesn't denounce his online anti-Semitic alt-right racists. He yells about Mexican judges and disabled journalists and POWs and women bleeding from their wherevers, and says that his political opponents' wives are ugly and that his political opponents' fathers tried to assassinate JFK. He stands against a strong foreign policy. He says he'd order our soldiers to target the families of jihadis in violation of both decency and law. He says the chief functions of the federal government include, and he said this, housing and health care. He flip-flops on abortion and guns and religious freedom and everything else. He says he'll refuse to take moral sides in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He embraces nonsense economics like protectionism and tariffs. He doesn't care about the Constitution at all because he's never read it, because he's written more books than he's read. He's ignorant. He revels in the ignorance. He was a Democrat until almost literally 5 minutes ago. He's a scam artist and a bully and a coward. Here's the problem, okay? Some conservatives are justifying all this garbage in order to boost him to victory. You can hold your nose and vote Trump. I get it. I might do the same thing. But do not justify perversions of your ideology, versions of your principles. Don't justify the perversion of your principles in order to justify your support for him. You want to hold your nose and vote Trump? Go ahead and do it. You want to destroy conservatism in order to do it? Please don't. Now, there are some people who are celebrating the garbage heap that is Donald Trump in order to boost him to victory. They're calling anybody with questions a thumbsucker. They're telling conservatives to shut up and sing along with the orange God King worship choir. They're calling any conservative who worries about corruption of conservatism a Republican against Trump, an RAT, a rat. People like this, the people who celebrate Trump, not people who are just voting, holding their noses, the people who celebrate Trump and pretend he's a conservative and try to pervert conservatism to fit Donald Trump, those people are sellouts for Trump. They're S-O-F-T, soft. Those people, by the reason, are the way that this Never Trump movement even exists in the first place, because there's an idea that the people willing to sell out conservatism for victory are going to destroy both victory and conservatism. But here's a serious question for conservatives, because this is the question that I always get asked whenever I say this stuff. So I've just laid out a bunch of horrible decisions in a row, and it really is. I mean, there really isn't a fantastic decision here. I mean, it's hard not to be enthusiastic about an election going in. I know, I've lived through enough of them, not as many as some folks, but I mean, you want to be enthusiastic going into an election. So what do? I think the first thing that we need to do as conservatives, is recognize a basic truth. Conservatives have already lost this election. Okay, we now have a couple of bad choices in front of us, some really bad choices in front of us. One may be much worse than the other, by the way. But conservatism already lost. So here's the real question. How do we start over and build this thing up from the beginning? Because we hear from a lot of the speakers, and I think, of course, they're right, that the same thing, we lost, and we need to fight. So my goal tonight is to talk about how to actually rebuild a movement that's going to be able to combat all the evils that the left wants to pursue. So I'm going to get a little bit practical about it, because usually it's a little bit vague. So for me, building the conservative movement is a four-step process. So step one is pretty obvious from what I've said already. We have to know our own values. One of the great lies of all time, the lie that's promulgated by the left, is the idea that diversity is our strength. Diversity of life experience, diversity of knowledge, that's great. Diversity of values is our weakness. We have to join together under the banner of the values that we share. Sociologist Robert Putnam, he's a leftist, and he believed strongly in the notion that diversity is our strength. And then he did the research, and he found, quote, the only two things that go up as the diversity of your census tract goes up are protest marches and television watching. But there was one thing that brought people of all types together, all races, all creeds, all religions. What brought everybody together was common values. So he visited an ethnically diverse religious community, and here's what he said. He said some other shared identity trumped their ethnicity. They weren't thinking of themselves sitting there as I'm black, or I'm white, or I'm pink or yellow. They were thinking about their relationship with, in that case, with God. Here's what our common value is. Defense of Western civilization. Okay, we're a band of brothers, we are. And that band of brothers is not separated by race or ethnicity, and it's not separated by racialism or tribalism. America isn't one nation for blacks, and it's not one nation for whites. Barack Obama said the same stuff, but he certainly didn't mean it. Right? It's a nation that we hold together in common, and it's a nation that's built on values. And if we really want to make America great again, if we really do, that doesn't happen unless you know what made America great in the first place. It doesn't happen by handing over power to any one figure who you think is going to win for you. It happens by understanding what did make America great in the first place. And that's very simple. Individual liberty guaranteed by a limited government that draws its legitimacy from a moral and religious people. When I say liberty, I don't mean libertinism. It doesn't mean take all my property, let the government run roughshod over me, just let me smoke my dope and put my genitals where I want. That's what the left seems to think liberty means. Liberty means the notion you have rights that were given to you by nature and nature's creator, and nobody has the right to bother you so long as you're not bothering anybody else. That's what liberty means. And what liberty in government means, this doesn't mean no government, it's not anarchy. It does mean a government that is not empowered to guarantee you stuff. It's there to protect you from others who want to take your stuff. It's also not there to make you feel better about your same-sex marriage, make you feel honored. It's also not there to make you feel better about your abortion. That's not what government is there to do. It's not there to protect you from big gulps, and it's not there to protect you from Leviticus. Right? Limited government is there to protect you from people who are trying to violate your rights. And when I say we draw our legitimacy from a moral and religious people, this is the most important aspect. This doesn't mean everybody has to be a Bible believer. It does mean, it also doesn't mean that religion